The gilded cage the world knew Seraphina Croft as a doyenne of industry, a philanthropist whose name was a gold-plated stamp on the city's opera houses, museum wings, and university libraries. Before we dive into the story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. To the public, she was a benevolent queen. But to Elara Vance, she was the woman who had stolen the sun. Their relationship hadn't begun in opposition, but in a shared dream that felt, to Elara, like mentorship from a goddess. Elara, a fiercely gifted architect with eyes that saw the world in lines and light, had been Seraphina's protégé. Seraphina, with her elegant silver hair and a voice like aged champagne, had cultivated her, nurtured her talent, and called her my girl. Together, they had conceived of the Helios. It was more than a skyscraper. It was Elara's soul rendered in steel, glass, and living botany. It was a testament to a sustainable future, a breathing tower with spiraling green terraces, a skin of photovoltaic cells that tracked the sun like a flower, and a revolutionary water reclamation system inspired by the Namib desert beetle. For 7 years, they had toiled. Elara's nights were a blur of drafting, modeling, and impassioned arguments over structural integrity and aesthetic flow. Seraphina, the maestra of capital and influence, had cleared the political and financial jungles, her every public utterance praising the unparalleled genius of her young partner. Elara was in love, not just with her creation, but with Julian, a landscape artist whose quiet support was the only thing that could pull her from her work. He was designing the terraced gardens of the Helios, his vision of hanging flora and native grasses a perfect complement to hers. They were a team, a unit, their future as bright and soaring as the tower they were building. The betrayal, when it came, was not a dramatic confrontation but a quiet, surgical excision. It happened a week before the grand unveiling. Elara was summoned to Seraphina's penthouse office, a space so high above the city it felt disconnected from the world below. Seraphina was standing by the window, looking down at the Helios, which pierced the clouds like a needle of light. "It's magnificent, isn't it?" Seraphina said without turning. "A legacy." "Our legacy," Elara corrected, a proud smile on her face. Seraphina finally turned, and the warmth Elara had always known was gone, replaced by a glacial calm. "There's been a restructuring, Elara. The board feels a single, strong vision is needed to carry the brand forward." She slid a folder across the polished mahogany desk. It was a severance agreement, brutally generous in its financial terms and suffocatingly absolute in its non-disclosure clauses. It stipulated that Elara would have no claim, no credit, no association with the Helios or any future projects. Her name, she would later discover, had already been digitally scrubbed from every blueprint, every server, every piece of internal correspondence. Elara felt the air leave her lungs. She stared at the woman she had revered, the mother figure who had mentored her, and saw only a stranger. "But it's my design, my work, my life. You were a talented employee and you've been compensated handsomely for your time," Seraphina said, her voice devoid of emotion. "Security will see you out." The walk from that office was a nightmare. The colleagues who had celebrated her days before now avoided her gaze. She was a ghost in her own life. The final, twisting knife came from Julian. He was pragmatic, horrified by Seraphina's ruthlessness but terrified of her power. "She'll destroy you, Elara," he'd pleaded. "Take the money, we can go somewhere else, start over." But Elara was consumed. She saw compromise as complicity. Her obsession became a third person in their relationship, a cold, silent guest who sat between them at dinner and lay in their bed at night. Eventually, unable to breathe in the suffocating atmosphere of her rage, he left. The world celebrated Seraphina Croft. She was on the cover of magazines, her smug, benevolent face illuminated by the glow of the Helios, Elara's sun. The tower won every conceivable architectural award, each one a fresh stab in Elara's heart. She, meanwhile, spiraled. The generous severance was a poisoned chalice. She couldn't touch it without feeling like she was accepting the lie. She took on menial jobs. Her hands, once deft with drafting pens and scale models, now raw from cleaning supplies and manual labor. She moved into a squalid apartment in a forgotten borough, the view from her single window a sliver of brick wall. Her own world had shrunk to a monochrome existence of bitterness, while Seraphina lived in the vibrant color Elara had created. For 5 years, her apartment became a war room. The walls were a chaotic collage of newspaper clippings, timelines, corporate charts, and photographs of Seraphina. She lived like a nun devoted to a dark god. Vengeance. She didn't want Seraphina dead. Death was a release. She wanted to deconstruct her, to strip her of her reputation, her power, and her stolen glory, leaving her naked and irrelevant in the rubble of her own life. Seraphina's greatest fear, Elara knew from years of close observation, was not poverty, but insignificance. The campaign began with whispers. Using encrypted emails and burner phones, Elara became an anonymous source. She found a young, hungry journalist named Maya, who was tired of writing puff pieces about the city's elite. She fed her morsels, never the main course. A minor zoning variance on a past project, an anonymous quote about inflated budgets for a charity wing, a subtle question about the environmental impact reports of a Croft subsidiary. Each story was a tiny paper cut, insignificant on its own, but cumulatively they began to bleed. Maya's articles, meticulously sourced, began to create a faint, dissonant hum beneath the symphony of praise for Seraphina. Next, Elara targeted the delicate ecosystem of Seraphina's social standing. She used her architectural software skills to flawlessly replicate the intricate invitations to the city's most exclusive galas and charity balls. These forgeries were sent not to Seraphina, but to her most arrogant rivals, timed to have them arrive at the door of an event for which they were not on the list. The resulting scenes of public embarrassment were deliciously humiliating, whispers of Seraphina's perceived sloppiness or arrogance rippling through the elite. The most personal attack was on Seraphina's vanity as a connoisseur of fine art. Elara spent months studying the bidding patterns of a boutique online auction house that Seraphina favored. She then commissioned a struggling art student to create a forgery of a minor work by a modernist painter Seraphina prided herself on discovering. Elara, through a series of shell accounts, entered the auction, goading Seraphina into a bidding war against a phantom rival. Seraphina, blinded by ego, paid a ludicrous seven-figure sum for a worthless fake. The story, when it eventually broke, made her a laughingstock in the art world. The emotional toll on Elara was immense. She was a wraith, gaunt and pale, fueled only by coffee and a cold, burning rage. There were nights she would stare at her haggard reflection and see the ghost of the woman she once was. She had sacrificed everything for this, and the question of whether it was worth the hollowing out of her own soul was a constant, gnawing presence. But then she would see an image of Seraphina, dedicating a new wing of the Helios, and the fire would reignite, burning away all doubt. The masterstroke, the grand finale of her symphony of destruction, was aimed at the Helios itself. Buried deep within the thousands of pages of her original schematics was a dormant command sequence, a ghost in the machine known only to its creator. It was a fail-safe she designed to reset the building's complex atmospheric and environmental systems. It wouldn't cause physical destruction, but something far more insidious. It would make Seraphina's perfect creation sick. She chose her moment with poetic precision, the 5th anniversary of the Helios's grand opening. Seraphina was hosting a lavish gala in the celestial ballroom on the top floor, a celebration of her continued success. The city's powerful and beautiful were all in attendance. Elara did not need to be there. She sat in her dimly lit apartment, the glow of her single laptop illuminating her face. The city across the river glittered, bisected by the impossibly bright needle of the Helios. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat counting down the final moments of her 5-year obsession. With a deep breath, she typed the final command and hit enter. At first, it was imperceptible. A slight stuffiness in the air of the grand ballroom, the faintest discoloration in the water served by the waitstaff. Then, the building's state-of-the-art climate control began to falter, sending waves of humid, uncomfortable heat through the venue. A low, unpleasant odor, like souring milk, began to seep from the vents of the celebrated water recycling system. The automated lighting, designed to mimic the soft glow of twilight, began to flicker erratically. A murmur of confusion rippled through the crowd. Seraphina, on stage preparing to give a speech, signaled frantically to her staff, but it was too late. The lights went out completely, plunging the glittering gala into a terrifying darkness, punctuated only by the green glow of the emergency exit signs. Panic began to curdle the air, but Elara wasn't finished. As the city's elite stumbled in the dark, the colossal video screens in the lobby and the ballroom, which minutes before had been displaying a slideshow of Seraphina's triumphs, flickered to life. There, on the screens, was Elara's face. Not the gaunt, haunted woman she had become, but a recording of the vibrant, passionate architect she had been, filmed 5 years ago. She stood beside a scale model of the Helios, her eyes alight with genuine joy. Then the image dissolved into a calm, present-day Elara. Her voice, cool and steady, filled the cavernous, darkened space. Good evening. For 5 years, Seraphina Croft has claimed this masterpiece as her own. Tonight, the masterpiece will speak for itself. What followed was a devastatingly precise presentation. Elara, with the cold logic of a prosecutor, laid out the entire deception. She showed original design drafts in her own hand, with her signature and timestamps. He displayed initial contracts bearing both her and Seraphina's names. She played video logs of their early brainstorming sessions, Seraphina's voice clearly heard saying, "Elara, this is your vision. I'm just here to help you build it." She then confessed, calmly and methodically, to being the architect of Seraphina's recent misfortunes, detailing every social humiliation, every financial sting, linking them all back to the original sin of the betrayal. The final image was a live feed, switched on by Maya the journalist, who was in the room. It showed Seraphina's face, illuminated by the panicked glow of a cell phone, contorted in a mask of pure horror, rage, and dawning comprehension. She was trapped, exposed in the heart of her stolen kingdom, her legacy crumbling around her live on every screen. Elara had not just taken back her story, she had made Seraphina the villain in it for all the world to see. The fallout was an avalanche. Lawsuits, shareholder revolts, and forensic investigations tore Seraphina's empire apart. Her name was no longer a mark of prestige, but a synonym for deceit. The Helios, her greatest triumph, stood empty and silent, a towering monument to her disgrace. Her allies vanished, and her gilded world collapsed into dust. For Elara, the satisfaction she had craved for so long was not the explosive, triumphant feeling she had imagined. It was a deep, quiet hum, the sound of a great and terrible machine finally powering down. The fire of vengeance that had fueled her for years was extinguished, and in its place was a vast, cold emptiness. She had won, but she had also lost 5 years of her life to a ghost. The ending of her story was not a return to her old life. That woman was gone, burned away in the crucible of her obsession. Instead, it was a quiet dawn. She took a fraction of the restitution she was awarded in the lawsuits and moved to a small, wind-swept town on the coast, a place where skylines were measured by the peaks of waves, not buildings. She started to design again, not for fame or glory, but for the simple, clean joy of creation. She designed small, elegant, sustainable homes for the local fishermen and teachers, her hands finding a new, more honest purpose in shaping wood and stone. She was rebuilding her soul, one beam at a time. One afternoon, a package arrived. It was from Maya. Inside was a copy of a prestigious international architecture journal. She had written the cover story. It was a deep dive into the saga of the Helios, now under new ethical ownership and undergoing a restoration of its original design integrity. The headline was simple and bold: "The vision of Elara Vance, a legacy reclaimed." Elara walked out onto the small porch of the house she had built for herself. She held the magazine in her hand, the paper cool against her skin. She looked not at the clipping, but out at the vast, unending expanse of the ocean. The satisfaction, she realized, was never truly in Seraphina's ruin. It was here, in the quiet rebuilding of a life on her own terms. The gilded cage was a distant memory, and in its place was the vast, open sky. And for the first time in a very long time, as the sun warmed her face, Elara truly felt its light.